Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Lagos was a city of light and shadow, bursting with energy that refused to sleep. The mainland streets were alive with noisy commercial buses and motorbikes weaving through thick traffic, while the neon brilliance of Victoria Island's skyscrapers displayed the more glamorous side of town. Amid this backdrop existed a hidden nightlife that thrived when the rest of the city tried to wind down. Elegant lounges, upscale bars, and exclusive clubs shared space with gritty streetside joints, each playing its part in the symphony of urban chaos. It was in one of these vibrant nighttime locales that the paths of two unlikely people would cross. The first was Tunde, a billionaire whose name carried weight in corporate boardrooms across the continent. Barely 40 years old, Tunde had built a telecommunications empire from scratch. His polished suits, imported from Italy, and the hush around his private life had given him an aura of mysterious sophistication. People whispered about his rumored hunger for pleasures that money could buy, but few details were ever confirmed. Wealth in Lagos came with its privileges, and Tunde had perfected the art of staying just below the gossip column's radar. On this particular night, however, Tunde wanted something out of the ordinary. He had spent the past week locked in a series of contract negotiations that promised to expand his empire farther into neighboring Ghana and beyond. Deals were signed, sealed, and ready to be announced by morning. It was time to celebrate, or at least, to unwind. A close friend had recommended the Firefly Club, a venue less known by the city's elite but praised for its raw energy and provocative performances. Firefly Club was located on a less polished strip of Victoria Island, close enough to the high-end crowd but still drawing a more eclectic mix of patrons. A long corridor neon lit in shades of purple and gold led into a dimly lit lounge, where old-school Afrobeat songs blended seamlessly with edgy hip-hop tunes. Mirrors along the walls reflected flickers of strobe lights, giving the illusion that the dance floor was a kaleidoscope of color and motion. Threading his way through the crowd, Tunde felt a surge of anticipation. He was no stranger to these clubs, but the Firefly had an unrefined pulse, a raw rhythm. He sensed he was stepping into a different world, one that promised new experiences he found both thrilling and risky. In stark contrast to Tunde's polished image, Safia graced the stage of the Firefly Club that night with an elegance that belied the profession she had chosen out of necessity. She was a skilled dancer, with a body as lithe as a river reed and eyes that sparkled with defiance. Clad in a shimmering outfit of gold sequins, she appeared larger than life under the stage lights. Safia's family had migrated from northern Nigeria down to Lagos when she was just a teenager, following her father's job in construction. Dreams of scholarships and degrees had quickly given way to economic realities when her father fell ill, leaving Safia as the main breadwinner. A knack for dance and an unyielding ambition led her to audition at the Firefly Club. Despite the stigma attached to her work, she handled the attention with poise. She had grown used to the catcalls and the wandering eyes, seeing them more as stepping stones to financial independence. Safia had no illusions about the precarious nature of her chosen path. She aimed to save enough money to enroll in a reputable dance academy, possibly overseas, and develop a more legitimate career. Every tip dropped at her feet, every request for a private dance, was part of a bigger plan. That night, as Tunde scanned the stage, he spotted Safia almost immediately. She wasn't just another dancer, her moves had precision and flair, akin to a contemporary choreographer rather than a simple entertainer. There was a sensual fluidity in her steps, punctuated by the occasional sharp flick of her hips that teased the crowd. Her gaze never faltered, locked on an invisible horizon as if she were performing for herself alone. Their eyes met briefly. Tunde, seated in a secluded VIP lounge, and Safia, under the hot glow of stage lights. Time seemed to suspend in that stolen moment. She offered him a fleeting smile, more of a polite acknowledgement than an invitation. But Tunde felt a spark, a wave of excitement that seemed to course through him. He found himself leaning forward in his seat, momentarily forgetting his business empire and the carefully cultivated image he had so meticulously built. When the music died down, Safia stepped off the stage, heart pounding, aware that several admirers were waiting to get her attention. Dancers fluttered to the edges of the lounge, and men, some boisterous, some silent, stretched out thousands of naira in tips. But as she made her way to a corner, collecting the last few bills left on the stage, a discreet voice behind her said, "You were mesmerizing tonight." Turning around, Safia recognized Tunde. She had seen him in newspaper articles, never paying too much attention, but enough to register that he was extremely wealthy, possibly one of Nigeria's youngest billionaires. He stood casually, dressed in a dark suit that seemed to catch the sparse light. A faint scent of expensive cologne wafted around him, subtle yet compelling. "Thank you," Safia responded, allowing a polite half-smile. Tunde offered his hand. "Tunde," he introduced himself, though he assumed she might know his name. "I'm Safia." She hesitated, evaluating the intensity in his eyes. This was a man accustomed to getting whatever he wanted. "I know," he replied simply, gently clasping her hand. "I've been watching your performance. You dance differently, with a passion I rarely see." His words stirred a complex reaction in her. She was used to false flattery from lustful eyes. Yet Tunde's tone had a sincerity that she couldn't immediately dismiss. This was neither a drunken brawl nor the average customer who came simply looking for a good time. Safia felt a certain curiosity tug at her. "I would like a private dance," Tunde said, "if you're available." She hesitated for a moment. Club policy allowed it, but her instincts told her that Tunde was not merely after a fleeting moment of pleasure. His gaze carried intensity, almost as if a business proposition floated behind his eyes. For a split second, Safia wondered if she should be cautious. Something about Tunde hinted that he never did anything on a small scale. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she nodded. "Sure, let me just freshen up, and we can discuss the details." As Tunde watched Safia walk away with a sway that combined purpose and allure, he felt a surge of impatience. He had come for a night of release, but something about Safia transcended the typical escapades. The pounding of the club's music faded into the background as Tunde mentally spun scenarios of what it would be like to have Safia exclusively at his beck and call. He tried to brush the thought away. He was well aware he was venturing into territory that could complicate his carefully controlled existence. Yet in this city of bright lights and deeper shadows, the seeds of fate had been planted. Neither Tunde nor Safia could anticipate the storms soon to come. Their fateful collision that night was just the first tremor in what would become a series of events leading them down roads they never could have predicted. An hour later, Tunde found himself in one of the club's plush private rooms, a velvet-draped space tinged in amber lighting. Soft Afro-jazz music wafted from hidden speakers, setting a more subdued mood than the pulsating main stage. A chilled bottle of premium champagne stood on a side table, beads of condensation rolling down its dark glass. Tunde sipped a glass in silence, his mind dancing with scenarios both carnal and strategic. A knock on the door broke his reverie. Safia entered in a flowing, vibrant blue robe that she had draped over her earlier performance outfit. She carried herself with a composure beyond her years, her eyes scanning the discreet luxury of the private lounge. Setting aside her concerns about Tunde's possible motives, she approached him with measured confidence. "You don't seem like the typical customer," she began, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "It's not often that men here speak to me so politely." Tunde leaned back against the leather couch, running his fingers along the rim of his champagne flute. "I'm not here just for the show. Like I said earlier, your dancing is different. There's a story in the way you move." Safia quirked an eyebrow, unsure if this was a poetic line or a genuine observation. She knew she danced with passion. Each move was an unspoken echo of her struggles and dreams. Yet she had never heard a customer articulate it so clearly. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm trying to save up for a proper dance academy course. Something I can turn into a career that doesn't revolve around clubs." Tunde nodded, momentarily lost in thought. "What if I told you that I'd like to make you an offer? One that could speed up your plans for a better life?" Safia's heart skipped a beat. She had expected a typical private dance session. Perhaps Tunde would pay generously and be on his way. Instead, she found herself caught in a moment where the stakes seemed to be doubling. She carefully lowered herself into a chair across from him, the robe's edges whispering against her ankles. "I'm listening," she replied, meeting his gaze. Tunde took a moment before speaking. "I want you to be my personal dancer. I'm hosting a series of high-profile events to celebrate the expansion of my telecommunications company. It's not just in Lagos. Some events will be in Accra, Johannesburg, Nairobi. I'd like you to be part of the entertainment, but exclusively for me and my private circle." The words, personal dancer, rang in her ears with an undercurrent of suggestion. She tried to gauge the moral and physical boundaries. Nonetheless, the promise of a steady, lucrative contract was enticing, overshadowing the uncertainties of her nightly hustle at the Firefly. "Why me?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of apprehension. Tunde shrugged with calculated nonchalance. "Because you have undeniable talent. And because, for once in my life, I'd like to invest in something that isn't strictly business. This is my way of indulging a passion without it being a typical fling." Safia exhaled. She would be naive to assume that Tunde's proposition was free from personal desires. The word horny had floated around in his tabloids, whispers of affairs kept under wraps. But the clarity in his voice suggested that he might be genuine about the professional angle, at least partly. "What exactly would my responsibilities be?" she asked, crossing her legs to exude a composed front. "Dance at my events, come with me on business trips, help me create some exclusive performances for my clients and partners," Tunde listed off. "And if needed, be available for private sessions?" Safia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Private sessions? You mean private dances for you alone?" Tunde nodded. "Yes. I won't lie to you. I find you alluring, Safia. But I'm not going to force anything you're not comfortable with. My offer is for dance. If there's more, it's because we both want it, not because it's an obligation in a contract." There was a pause as Safia weighed the pros and cons. A voice inside her cautioned that mixing personal pleasure with professional obligations could lead to heartbreak. But another voice urged her to consider the financial security Tunde was dangling. In modern-day Lagos, few opportunities came without a gray area. "How much are we talking about?" she finally asked, bracing herself for either shock or disappointment. 10 million naira as a sign-on bonus? Tunde's tone was even, as though discussing the price of bread. Monthly allowances, a travel stipend, plus an opportunity to train in prestigious dance studios anywhere in the world if you want. All expenses covered by me. Safia's mind spun. 10 million naira was more money than she had ever seen in one place, and that was just the start. She could invest in her father's healthcare, secure an apartment, and even fund part of her dream to open a dance academy someday. Suddenly, the bright lights of Firefly felt too small to contain her ambitions. Still, she was cautious. "I'll need time to think about it," she said, lifting her chin. She refused to appear too eager. "It's a big decision for me." "Take all the time you need," Tunde replied kindly, standing up and offering his hand once more. "I leave tomorrow for Accra, but my assistant will provide you with the full details. If you decide to come, I'll arrange for you to meet me there. In the meantime, shall we have that private dance?" Safia nodded, rising from her seat. She let the robe slip off her shoulders, revealing her sequined outfit beneath. As the ambient music filled the room, she began a slow, measured routine that wove together the sensual and the graceful. Tunde leaned against the couch, eyes fixed on her every movement, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. When the final notes faded, Safia reached for the robe, heart pounding. She felt Tunde's gaze linger on her, a potent mix of appreciation and desire. It thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. As she slipped out of the private room, she realized her life had just taken a pivotal turn. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she knew nothing would ever be the same again. Less than a week had passed since that pivotal night at the Firefly Club. In the swirl of confusion and cautious excitement, Safia studied the contract Tunde's assistant had emailed her. It was lavish as promised. An initial deposit that would solve most of her financial problems, a monthly salary that dwarfed her current earnings, plus coverage for travel, accommodations, and dance classes. Yet the contract also demanded exclusivity. Safia would be bound to perform solely for Tunde's events, effectively tethering her future to a man she barely knew. Despite her father's unspoken disapproval of her nightlife job, he suspected more than he wanted to admit. Safia confided in her older sister, Jamila. A third-year university student, Jamila was more open-minded but also fiercely protective. The sisters had grown close in recent years, rallying around each other through their father's illness and their mother's never-ending attempts to keep peace in the family. One afternoon, Safia showed Jamila the contract on a borrowed laptop. "He's offering me everything I've wanted for so long," Safia murmured, her eyes alight with a mixture of gratitude and fear. "But I can't help feeling there's a catch." Jamila tapped her chin thoughtfully. "Is there anything specifically suspicious in the contract? Hidden clauses, conditions about intimacy?" Safia shook her head. "No, it's purely about performing at his events and traveling with him. It's the intangible stuff that scares me. Will he expect more eventually? How will people see me?" She sighed. "I'm already judged for being a stripper. Being a billionaire's personal dancer might just feed the rumor mill even more." Jamila placed a reassuring hand on Safia's shoulder. "This is a business relationship. Keep that in mind, and hopefully he'll respect the boundaries. If he doesn't, walk away. You'll still have your dignity." Bolstered by her sister's confidence, Safia made her decision. She signed the contract, emailed it back, and packed for Accra. She told herself she was stepping into a better life. Maybe Tunde wasn't a saint, but there was opportunity in his world, and she intended to seize it. Landing in Accra. Accra's Kotoka International Airport was modern, bustling with travelers from around the world. Stepping off the plane, Safia was greeted by a humid rush of air that clung to her skin. She spotted a neatly dressed driver holding a placard with her name. The drive through the city's palm-lined streets and vibrant markets introduced her to a new side of West Africa, different from the frenetic energy of Lagos but equally alive. They arrived at the plush hotel in the heart of the city's upscale neighborhood. As Safia entered the lobby, she spotted Tunde immediately. He was leaning against a marble pillar, dressed in a fitted sky blue shirt and navy trousers. His expression lit up when he saw her, and he approached with an ease that made him appear every bit the suave billionaire. "Welcome to Accra," he said, kissing her cheek lightly in greeting. "How was the flight?" "Smooth enough," Safia replied, mustering a polite smile. "Though I'm still trying to process how quickly everything has changed for me." Tunde gave a slight nod, eyes warm. "I'm glad you came. My Ghanaian partners have arranged a small gathering tonight. We'll see how you do, and then we'll refine your performances for the bigger events." Safia spent the afternoon exploring the city, escorted by Tunde's assistant. They visited the Arts Center, where she observed traditional Ghanaian dance troupes performing. She felt a spark of inspiration. Maybe she could blend her contemporary style with the African rhythms she witnessed. It was a reminder of why she had chosen dance in the first place, to tell stories that transcended language, culture, and prejudice. That night at the gathering, held at a luxury rooftop lounge overlooking the city's twinkling skyline, the event was small but exclusive. Safia felt her heart thrumming in her chest as she prepared backstage. She had chosen a costume that fused modern African print with a contemporary twist, tight-fitting leggings in vibrant Accra patterns and a sheer, flowing top that caught the breeze. Stepping onto the makeshift stage, she tuned out the small crowd of executives and local dignitaries. She moved to the music with a sensual grace that she had honed at Firefly, but she wove in moves inspired by the traditional dancers she saw earlier. Each twist, turn, and pirouette narrated a journey from struggle to triumph. The applause was thunderous for such a small gathering. Tunde, seated in a corner with his Ghanaian partners, wore an expression of pride and a hint of hunger. Safia caught his eye, and an unspoken electricity passed between them. It was a mixture of professional respect and undeniable attraction. Unveiling the first shadow. After the performance, Safia mingled politely with guests. Tunde introduced her as the rising star of his entertainment lineup. She accepted compliments with gracious humility, feeling a sense of accomplishment that was new and exhilarating. Yet as the night wore on, she sensed an undercurrent of tension in Tunde. He would occasionally check his phone, brow furrowed. Once or twice, she overheard him muttering curses under his breath. Later, in a quieter moment, Safia asked, "Is everything all right? You seem bothered." Tunde forced a smile. "A minor hiccup at the Lagos office. One of my main competitors is trying to overturn a newly signed contract. Nothing that can't be sorted, but it's irritating." He didn't elaborate, and Safia knew better than to pry. But by the time the evening wound down, Tunde's mood had soured considerably. She found him nursing a whiskey at the bar, shoulders tense. When she gently rubbed his shoulder, he startled, then relaxed slightly under her touch. "Stress of the job," he murmured, leaning closer. "Sometimes I wonder if all this is worth it. Building an empire leaves you with enemies." Safia offered a comforting smile, though she was unsure what to say. Money could buy comfort, opportunities, and even the best dancers. But it also seemed to carry a weight that eroded Tunde's peace of mind. That night, as she headed to her private suite, she couldn't shake off a nagging worry. She had entered Tunde's orbit hoping for security and a chance to nurture her craft. Yet his world appeared to be swirling with more chaos than he let on. It was her first glimpse of the darker side of success, one that might not be content with simply letting her dance. Unbeknownst to them both, the tension in Tunde's business affairs was only the start of a storm that would engulf their lives, and one tragic event on the horizon would shake their new arrangement to its core. In the following weeks, Safia's schedule became a whirlwind of rehearsals, business dinners, and short flights to different African cities. Tunde had arranged for her to take masterclasses with renowned choreographers who fused African folklore dancing with Western contemporary styles. Each day felt like a dream come true. Her technique sharpened, her confidence soared, and her bank account, once a constant source of anxiety, was now comfortably padded. She had performed at glitzy functions in Johannesburg, graced an exclusive party in Nairobi, and even danced in a high-profile charity gala in Lagos. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of her new life, she sensed the subtle ways Tunde's personal interest manifested. His touches lingered a bit too long. His compliments veered into suggestive territory more often than not. While Safia maintained professionalism, she knew the lines were blurring. Part of her was undeniably attracted to Tunde's power, his confidence, and the way he made her feel valued in a world that had once dismissed her as just another club dancer. Return to Lagos. They returned to Lagos for a charity event Tunde was hosting. The proceeds were going to a foundation aimed at empowering young women through education and skill building. Ironically, the mission resonated with Safia's own aspirations, to someday open a dance academy and empower young dancers like herself. That evening, the venue shimmered with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and well-dressed guests in flowing Nigerian agbadas and exquisite gowns. Safia performed a mesmerizing routine that combined contemporary dance with traditional Yoruba drumming. She commanded the stage, each movement telling a story of resilience and hope. By the time she finished, the audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. Tunde, standing near the stage in a tailored black tuxedo, beamed at her with unmistakable pride. The unpredictable twist. Amid the celebration, Tunde's phone buzzed incessantly. Messages poured in from his senior managers, each one seemingly more urgent than the last. Safia couldn't help but notice the frown lines that creased his forehead. After wrapping up her performance, she found Tunde huddled in a corner, barking orders into his phone. "What's happening?" she asked softly once he hung up. He exhaled sharply. "Some irregularities have been discovered in my financial statements. Massive sums unaccounted for. My CFO suspects corporate espionage or a setup. I need to go to my office immediately." Worry coiled in Safia's chest. She had never seen Tunde look so unsettled. "Do you want me to come with you?" He gave a stiff nod, surprising her. "Yes, please. I need someone I can trust by my side tonight." In the dead of night. It was nearly midnight when they arrived at the sleek high-rise that served as Tunde's corporate headquarters. The security guard at the entrance, clearly startled to see the CEO at such an hour, scrambled to grant them entry. Tunde's CFO, a wiry man in rimless glasses named Mr. Onyekachi, greeted them in the reception area. His face was grim. "I'm sorry to bother you at this hour, sir, but we found a data trail that suggests someone has been siphoning funds from your personal accounts. We suspect it's someone at a very senior level," Onyekachi explained as they entered the elevator. Tunde nodded, jaw set. "Then let's find out who," he growled. They marched through the dimly lit corridors to the CFO's office, where a cluster of computers displayed spreadsheets, bank logs, and transaction anomalies. While Tunde and his CFO pored over the data, Safia tried to offer moral support. She was out of her depth. Finance and corporate sabotage were foreign concepts to her. But she could sense the stakes. If Tunde was being framed or robbed, it could jeopardize everything: his business empire, his reputation, and even her new career under his patronage. Time dragged on as Tunde's eyes darted across the digital lines of data. Safia sat quietly in a corner, fighting the urge to doze off. Finally, Tunde stood up, a steely glint in his eyes. "We need to question the board members. Each one of them has had access to these accounts at some point," he said. "This level of theft couldn't have happened without inside knowledge." Just as they were about to leave for a more secure room to make some calls, the power went out. Complete darkness blanketed the office space, eliciting startled gasps from everyone present. A moment later, the building's backup generator kicked in, flooding the corridors with a dull, emergency light. That was when they heard a sharp, menacing sound, a gunshot echoing through the building. Safia's heart hammered in her chest. She crouched beside Tunde, who grabbed her arm protectively. "Everyone, stay low," he commanded in a hushed tone. The CFO's eyes were wide with terror. "Who in God's name is shooting?" he whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. The next moments passed in a blur of confusion. Security officers raced up the stairs, calling out that an intruder had been spotted on the lower floors. Another gunshot reverberated through the building, sending a spike of adrenaline surging through Safia's veins. Tunde's phone rang. He pressed it to his ear, face tense as he listened to the chaotic updates from the security team. "This is no random break-in," Tunde muttered. "Whoever did this planned it. They cut the power before the generator kicked in. It's a ploy to cause panic or maybe destroy evidence." In that instant, Safia realized just how high the stakes were in Tunde's world. Corporate espionage wasn't just about stolen money, it was about silencing those who uncovered the truth. Her mind raced. If Tunde was the target, what would these people do to ensure he never exposed them? The tragic revelation. Amid the confusion, Tunde guided Safia and the CFO to a secure room, used for high-level financial conferences. Inside, the walls were soundproof, the door reinforced. Panting for breath, they locked themselves in, listening anxiously for any sign of the intruder. Minutes stretched on like hours. At last, a security guard knocked, identifying himself. With trembling hands, Tunde opened the door. The guard's eyes were clouded with fear and sorrow. "Sir," he began shakily, "we found one of the board members, Mr. Bello. He's been shot." Tunde's heart plummeted. Mr. Bello was one of his oldest friends, a man who had stood by him when he first launched his telecommunications venture. "Is he?" The guard swallowed hard, shaking his head in despair. "He didn't make it, sir." In that moment, the gravity of the situation hit Safia like a physical blow. This wasn't just theft, someone had killed a board member. Tunde's empire was under siege from within, and now there was bloodshed in its wake. As the shock rippled through them, she wondered if she had been naive in believing that a contract of wealth and glamour could remain untouched by violence. That night, Safia realized that even in the world of the super-rich, tragedy could strike with brutal swiftness. The news spread through Lagos's business community like wildfire. A prominent board member of the Adamma group murdered under mysterious circumstances in the company's headquarters. It became the top headline on major news channels and the subject of countless discussions on social media. Speculation ran rampant, with pundits accusing Tunde of orchestrating the tragedy, while others insisted he was the real victim of a sinister corporate plot. In a city where rumors flew faster than facts, It felt as though the entire metropolis held its breath, waiting for the next explosive development. Immediate fallout. In the days that followed, Tunde was consumed by grief and guilt. He had lost a friend, a trusted advisor, and the situation with the missing funds only intensified the scrutiny upon him. Authorities launched a formal investigation, interviewing employees, combing through security footage, and analyzing electronic records. Tunde found himself under immense pressure to prove his innocence. His once unshakable composure began to crack. Safia, though not officially connected to the company, remained by Tunde's side. She was his personal dancer, but in this chaotic period, she became something of a confidant, someone to vent to and a calming presence during his sleepless nights. While Tunde's legal team wrangled with the police, Safia did her best to keep him anchored in moments of despair. Though she had never signed up for anything like this, she had grown to care for him beyond professional boundaries. She saw his vulnerability, recognized the human being behind the billionaire persona. The investigator assigned to the case was Inspector Kayamaka Ibekwe, a formidable woman who had risen through the ranks of the Lagos State Police. Known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense approach, Inspector Ibekwe wasted no time gathering evidence. She questioned board members one by one, but it was the CFO, Mr. Onyekachi, who revealed the suspicious anomalies in the books. "We believe the unauthorized transfers date back nearly 8 months, Inspector," he explained. "Whoever is behind this must have colluded with someone with top-level access." Mr. Bello suspected it, but he never disclosed any names before this happened. Ibekwe nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll check his personal records. Maybe he left a clue somewhere." Tunde under siege. While Tunde cooperated fully with the authorities, turning over internal documents, emails, and phone logs, public opinion wavered. The tabloids had a field day. Some implied that Tunde, dubbed the Horny Billionaire in more salacious columns, might have orchestrated Bello's death to keep certain secrets hidden. Others speculated that it was the work of a disgruntled competitor or a rival who coveted Tunde's seat at the top of the telecommunications chain. At one point, Tunde was briefly detained for questioning, prompting a media frenzy outside the police station. Safia watched from a black SUV as reporters swarmed the entrance, cameras flashing wildly. When Tunde finally emerged, tension knotted in his shoulders. He slipped into the back seat, not uttering a single word until they were safely away. "Everything I've built could crumble," he muttered at last, voice cracking. "Even if I'm innocent, mud sticks. Some people will always think I had a hand in Bello's death." Safia placed a gentle hand on his. "Then let's find the real culprit. We can't let them destroy you." He looked at her, eyes brimming with a mix of gratitude and desperation. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't deserve to be caught up in this mess." The boardroom showdown. A tense board meeting was convened to address the crisis. Safia, though not a formal member of the company, sat quietly off to one side, observing the interactions. Tunde stood at the head of a long mahogany table, flanked by his legal advisors. Other board members, each one a seasoned player in the high-stakes corporate world, seemed on edge. Some avoided eye contact, others fidgeted nervously with papers and pens. "We have to take decisive action," declared Mrs. Adebayo, one of the board's senior members. "This scandal is affecting our stock prices. We can't let the Adesina Group collapse over one tragedy." "What do you suggest?" Tunde asked, voice taut. "We might need an interim CO until the investigation clears you," she replied, avoiding his gaze. The suggestion was a dagger to Tunde's pride, but he swallowed the sting. "If that's what it takes to preserve the company, I'll consider it," he said quietly. "But trust me, I won't stop until I find who did this to Bello and to all of us." A private revelation. Later that evening, Tunde retreated to his penthouse in Banana Island, the city's most exclusive enclave. Safia joined him, intending to pack some items she'd left there, but a single look at his desolate expression made her stay. He paced the living room, frustration evident in every step. "I have no idea who to trust," Tunde muttered. "All these people are sharks, circling around, smelling blood in the water." Safia took a tentative step closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Inspector Ibekwe seems competent. She'll find the truth." Maybe, but I need to do my own digging. I can't sit back. He turned to Safia, taking her hands in his. Look, you've gone above and beyond just dancing for me. You've shown me compassion, steadiness, and, dare I say, loyalty. I don't have many people like that in my life. Safia felt her heart rate spike, warmth flooding her cheeks. In that moment, she realized her feelings for Tunde had grown in the fire of crisis. He wasn't just a horny billionaire with a penchant for lavish contracts. He was a flawed, vulnerable man who needed someone on his side. Carefully, she lowered her gaze, recalling all the warnings she'd given herself about mixing personal involvement with professional duties. Tunde, she started, her voice trembling slightly, I never expected any of this. But I want to help however I can. He reached up and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. For what it's worth, I'm grateful you're here. They stood in charged silence, a fragile, intimate moment under the dark cloud of scandal and murder. If fate had different plans for them, it was too late to turn back now. With each passing day, the tension escalated, and the lines between business arrangement and emotional entanglement blurred beyond recognition. In the weeks ahead, Inspector Ibekwe's investigation would push them to the brink. And in that crucible of uncertainty, a series of unpredictable events would lead to a shocking conclusion, one that would test the strength of their bond and redefine their futures forever. A full month after the tragic death of Mr. Bello, Inspector Ibekwe summoned Tunde, Safia, and the remaining board members to the Lagos State Police headquarters. The atmosphere was tense as everyone filed into a conference room lined with windows overlooking the bustling city. Each person carried their own mixture of anxiety and hope, uncertain whether the long-awaited conclusion to the investigation would bring relief or catastrophe. Inspector Ibekwe's revelation. The inspector began by distributing copies of forensic financial reports. Her braided hair was pinned neatly, and her commanding presence demanded the room's full attention. We have meticulously traced the money trail and discovered a systematic pattern of funds being siphoned from Mr. Adezna's personal and corporate accounts over the past several months, she announced. The perpetrator hid their tracks well, but not perfectly. She then called forward an older man, one of Tunde's long-serving financial executives, Mr. Dinladi. Safia recognized him from various events. He was always cordial but never drew much attention to himself. After cross-referencing digital footprints with authorized logins and comparing electronic signatures, we discovered that Mr. Dinladi had accessed restricted financial files on multiple occasions, Ibekwe continued. We also have evidence he arranged the meeting on the night of Mr. Bello's murder, presumably to ensure Mr. Bello would discover incriminating documents, thus provoking a confrontation. Mr. Dinladi is our prime suspect. A gasp echoed through the room. Tunde's face reflected a storm of disbelief and anger. Dinladi? He's been with me since the early days of this company. Why would he do this? Inspector Ibekwe glanced at the stoic Mr. Dinladi, who stared blankly at the floor. Greed, revenge, or a combination of both, she replied. We also found that he was communicating with one of your competitors. It appears he struck a deal to destabilize your company from within. Mr. Bello might have been onto him, and Dinladi took extreme measures to keep him quiet. The confession and arrest. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Mr. Dinladi trembled, tears welling in his eyes. It was never supposed to go this far, he choked out. I was promised a fortune if I helped them cripple Adesina Group. When Bello became suspicious, I panicked. I wanted to scare him, not kill him. The gun went off. His voice broke into a sob. Tunde stood silent, fists clenched, battling a mix of rage and betrayal. Inspector Ibekwe signaled to two officers, who promptly handcuffed Dinladi. You are under arrest for embezzlement and murder, she stated calmly, reading him his rights as the other board members looked on in stunned silence. Relief surged through Tunde, mingled with deep sorrow for his friend. Bello's death had been the accidental result of corporate greed, but the grim reality remained. A good man was gone, and no amount of money or confessions could bring him back. The unpredictable closure. In the days that followed, the media buzzed with updates on Dinladi's arrest and confessions. Tunde, now vindicated, stepped back into the public eye. He gave a sober press conference alongside Inspector Ibekwe, thanking her team for their thorough investigation and promising a complete overhaul of his company's internal processes. It was not the triumphant return he had envisioned. The tragedy weighed heavily on him, and it showed in his subdued demeanor. Stocks in Adesina Group began to stabilize, and public opinion largely swung back in Tunde's favor. Yet the cost had been steep. One of his oldest allies was gone, and another stood behind bars for murder. The board moved quickly to finalize Tunde's reinstatement as CEO. It seemed as though the nightmare might finally be ending, but fresh challenges loomed. Professional fork in the road. During this time, Safia found herself at a crossroads. With the crisis resolved, she assumed Tunde no longer needed her moral support in the same way. Moreover, her name had circulated in gossip columns. Some called her Tunde's muse, while others labeled her a mere side attraction in a scandal. She realized she wanted more for herself than to be an accessory, no matter how well paid. One evening, she approached Tunde in his penthouse, wearing a simple Accra dress rather than her usual glam performance attire. Nervousness fluttered in her stomach. Tunde poured a glass of water, gesturing for her to sit on the plush sofa. "I just want to thank you," he began, eyes filled with gratitude. "You stuck by me through the worst period of my life." She nodded softly. "I'm glad it's over for you. But I've been thinking about my own future, Tunde." He gave a slow, understanding nod. "I figured as much. After all we've been through, it's clear you're more than just a dancer. You have a talent that deserves the right stage." Safia hesitated, searching for the right words. "I've gained so much from working with you. The exposure, the resources, the connections. But I think it's time I take what I've learned and step out on my own. I want to enroll in that prestigious dance academy we talked about, maybe even open a dance school one day." He listened attentively, then stood, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I support you completely. I'll even sponsor your initial tuition if you need it." Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes. She remembered the first night she met him at the Firefly Club, how she'd thought of him as just another wealthy man looking for pleasure. Over time, she discovered complexities within him, and he uncovered a soul in her far deeper than the stage persona she had displayed. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling a sense of closure. A professional goodbye, an uncertain future. They parted ways amicably, though Tunde insisted on a grand farewell party for Safia, a private gathering in a boutique lounge, attended by close friends and a few select business associates. There, Safia performed one last dance under Tunde's patronage. The routine symbolized her journey, from the neon stages of a Lagos strip club to the refined circles of African high society, all culminating in her own leap of faith toward independence. In an unexpected twist, the performance ended with Tunde making a short speech, praising Safia's artistry and resilience. No one in the audience missed the glimmer of affection in his eyes. Then, stepping back, he allowed her the final spotlight. Safia felt the crowd's applause wash over her, tears gleaming as she gracefully took her bow. By midnight, the gathering dispersed. Tunde walked Safia to her car, the Lagos night sky heavy with stars. "Will I see you again?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of hope and resignation. Safia smiled, stepping closer to brush a light kiss on his cheek. "Our paths might cross," she replied. "You still have a passion for good music, good dance, and, hopefully, a better understanding of what truly matters in life." She left him standing beneath the glittering skyline, both of them buoyed by the sense that, although their story had taken many unpredictable turns, it was concluding with a mutual respect they could both carry forward. In the modern African city that had been both their battlefield and their stage, they had found an ending that neither of them could have scripted, a tragic, turbulent saga that closed on a note of personal and professional evolution. Though nobody could say what the future held, both Tunde and Safia felt a cautious optimism, each armed with hard-won wisdom from their ordeal. As Safia's car merged into Lagos's ever-moving stream of headlights, she felt more certain than ever that her next dance would be entirely her own, free from the shadows of a past that once threatened to consume her. And Tunde, returning to his penthouse, realized for the first time that true fulfillment came not from wealth or fleeting pleasures, but from growth, redemption, and the connections he forged along the way. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.